Hey everybody, it's State Senator Mallory McMorrow. Welcome to yet another edition of our virtual coffee hours meetup with Mallory. Welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you who have joined us before. This is our virtual coffee hours that we host just about every single week that the Senate is in session. We are live streaming across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And the way this works is we give you an update on what's happening in the state of Michigan, what is happening in the state legislature. We share some good news from the district, and then we open it up for live Q&A. So you can type in a question on any of the platforms that we are live streaming on. They will funnel back to us. I will have Liz join us later in the program to facilitate Q&A. But friendly reminder, if you do have a question, just because this is streaming across multiple platforms and will be available afterwards for people to watch anytime. When you ask your question, make sure to include your name if that is not obvious by your screen name, what city you are posting from or representing, and then fire away with your question. So we will get into it. It's a rainy day. Otherwise, I would say we could get through it so you could get outside, but maybe not. Maybe not today. Today's a good inside day. All right. To start off, on Tuesday, all remaining COVID restrictions were lifted statewide here in Michigan. We've made incredible progress on vaccination rates here in the state and have seen our cases and hospitalizations plummet, which is great news. We're starting to see states across the country fully re-engage and reopen. Michigan has been open for a significant amount of time, but that means mask mandates are lifted for everybody, and capacity limits were one of the last remaining things at venues and restaurants. So all restrictions were lifted. However, CDC guidance still applies, and they recommend that those who are not vaccinated should continue to mask up for your own protection. We know that vaccines are now open to everybody 12 and above, but for many of us who have kids who are not eligible to be vaccinated, I know that we've heard from a lot of people who are still thinking about what they consider safe and potentially keeping kids away from certain situations, particularly indoor areas where there's little ventilation, which is completely understandable. It's something that I think about as well with my daughter, who's only 4.5 months old, so not eligible for vaccination. But good reminder to continue to mask up if you are somebody who has not been vaccinated yet. Or just, I think I've heard from a lot of people who have learned how valuable they are over the past year. So if you are feeling sick or under the weather, number one, don't go out. I think that's the top tip. But I know some people are continuing to kind of wear a mask if you kind of feel under the weather to not spread a cold or the flu or anything that you might have. So great news and great progress as we start to fully re-engage with each other as we get into summer. Just a reminder, we've talked about this for the past few weeks. If you still need to find a vaccine, there's a really, really easy tool at vaccines.gov for you to be able to find a vaccine. And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, because if you are in our district, you're an Oakland County resident, Oakland County is now offering an additional incentive of a $50 gift card to any eligible person 12 years or older who gets their COVID-19 vaccine by July 4th. You can find out some more information on the website, oaklandcountyvaccine.com. So if you're still holding out, if it's not on your to-do list, you could get vaccinated, protect yourself from COVID-19, and score a bonus $50 to spend on your night out when you can go out safely. So that's pretty exciting. All right, we're going to jump to updates from the Capitol, and I've got presentation and some slides to share with you, this magical multimedia thing that we are able to do here. All right, last week, my colleagues and I reintroduced a legislative bill package that would protect families by encouraging gun owners to securely lock away and store their weapons when not in use. My bill is Senate Bill 553, which would work with Senator Rosemary Bayer's bill, Senate Bill 550, to require firearms to be properly secured by owners to prevent accidental injury or death when they have minors in the home. And this is something that we've heard from a number of you who have either friends or relatives who have guns in the home, who are concerned, particularly when sending kids over to somebody else's house. Kids are curious, and we know that the increase of accidental injury or death increases substantially when there's easy access to firearms. Other legislation in the package, including Senate Bills 551 and 552, would exempt gun safety devices like safes, lockboxes, trigger and barrel locks from sales and use tax to make them easier for gun owners to access. All right, moving on. On Monday, June 21st, so last week, we took Friday off from our normal coffee hour to celebrate the first ever federally recognized Juneteenth, which we will get into at the end of this presentation, but we are jumping back into last week to catch you up on the news that happened on Monday, June 21st. I was really proud to join Governor Whitmer as she took action to protect LGBTQ plus residents here in the state of Michigan. Executive Directive 2021-3 prohibits the use of state and federal funds for the harmful practice of so-called conversion therapy on minors. This is a huge step. It's a huge step forward. It's a huge step that signals that the state of Michigan stands with all of our residents and will take the steps necessarily to protect LGBTQ youth. But one thing that I think is important is this does not go far enough. And I have had a bill for the past 2 terms to ban this practice outright. This is an incredibly dangerous practice that has shown to increase risk of depression, anxiety, and suicide up to 4 times in people who are forced to go through this practice. And it simply doesn't work. You know, the science does not back the idea that you can change somebody's sexual orientation from somebody who identifies as LGBTQ into somebody who is straight. And that's what this practice purports to do. So it just doesn't work. It's incredibly dangerous and harmful. So my bill would prohibit any licensed therapist. So if you are licensed through the state of Michigan, it would prohibit you from practicing this on minors. It's intentionally a narrow bill. And frankly, my hope is that we are able to push this through this term and outlaw this practice once and for all to protect kids. These are kids. I don't know about you, but it was awkward enough to try to figure out who you are and navigate the world. You know, think back to when you're 11, 12, 13, and just trying to figure out who you are. If you layer on top of that you're navigating all of these feelings, and then somebody is forcibly telling you, sometimes through really extreme measures, that how you feel and who you love and who you're attracted to is wrong and that you are fundamentally broken. So we will continue to push this, but this was a big step forward. And the good news on our bill is that unlike last term, the bill this term that I have reintroduced is bipartisan. So we hope that this will move forward. There are 20 other states that have already banned this incredibly dangerous practice under both Republican and Democratic governors. This should not be a partisan issue. It should simply be protecting kids from what is effectively child abuse. All right, moving on. Next up, the Senate Oversight Committee, for those who may be following along, released their findings on the 2020 election. So I want to pull up a little video here and show you some analysis of kind of what went on, and then we can talk about what happened in the Senate Oversight Committee. So
investigation that was launched months ago by Michigan's Republican-led Senate Oversight Committee. And it calls for Attorney General Dana Nessel to consider investigating people who have made false allegations about Michigan's results for their own benefit. The committee did a deep dive into several areas, including the vote count at Detroit's TCF Center and the results in Antrim County. Now, you might remember initial results in Antrim County showed a victory for Joe Biden when Donald Trump was actually ahead. It was attributed to human error, not a problem with voting machines, and it was fixed. But it became a focal point of former President Trump's challenge of the results and calls of voter fraud. In the 55-page report, the committee says people promoting the fraud theories in Antrim County are, quote, in a position of zero credibility. It also says people should be, quote, confident the results represent the true results of the ballots cast by the people of Michigan. Joe Biden defeated then-President Donald Trump by 155,000 votes here in our state of Michigan. The Antrim County clerk spoke just a little while ago at a rally. She said she can't comment because of pending litigation, but did thank her supporters.
We've been through a horrible turmoil, and we have to get things back to normal. I'd like to thank the 82 county clerks that have had my back day in and day out. November 3rd. I have gotten phone calls, letters, cards, everybody has been so supportive.
The committee's 3 Republicans are recommending legislation to close what they call vulnerabilities in future elections. There are already bills pending for things like tougher voter ID rules. Democrats, however, oppose the measures.
All right. Oh. Always the error when
Today
you play
we're ready to see
videos
the
like this.
results of the investigation that was launched
There we go. Man, live technical challenges. All right, so the summary of the report from the Senate Oversight Committee, it's a 55-page report that debunks a number of unsubstantiated claims of election fraud and irregularities, including claims that dead people voted, that hundreds of thousands of unsolicited absentee ballots were sent in to Michigan voters, that a machine error switched votes in Antrim County, and that tabulators at the TCF Center in Detroit, where absentee ballots were counted, were connected to the internet, allowing outside parties to tamper with the results. And we will post a link to the full 55-page report if you want to read it and go through it and see what the findings were. Now, despite this report, some of my colleagues, the Senate Republicans, continue to push forward bills that would make it harder to vote. I continue to stand opposed to these bills, and just especially in the wake of this report, it just goes to show they lack merit or necessity. There are still 39 bills in a package to solve an issue that doesn't exist. Our elections were fair and secure. We know that our election officials are some of the hardest working people in our state. There have been more than 250 audits conducted of the 2020 election that have verified over and over and over again the results of the election. So there was a bill that I spoke out against last week to require photo ID. And my colleagues noted that this polls very well, that when you ask most people, should you need a photo ID to vote? Most people say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Well, first of all, voter ID is already a requirement in the state of Michigan. When you go to vote, you must present your ID. If you don't have it on you, you are currently allowed to sign an affidavit verifying your identity. It is a crime to do that, to falsify that document. And then you are given a ballot to vote, and the signatures are checked against your voter registration file. This is a very, very secure system. And when I reached out to my clerks to ask about this bill in particular, they noted that this would mostly impact seniors, the elderly. You can imagine that when you have surrendered your license, when you're no longer driving, many of our seniors in our communities just don't have an ID after that. And this would prohibit seniors from being able to access absentee ballots, which many people do, and prohibit them from voting, as well as some of the most vulnerable members of our community, including the homeless. I know some of our clerks have gone out of their way to reach out to homeless members of our community, make sure that they can exercise their constitutional right to vote that they have, just like you and I do. So we will continue to keep you posted on these bills, but encourage people to read this report. And we will hopefully be able to move forward in supporting what our election officials have said that they've needed, which is more time to process absentee ballots. That's something that was asked for by our election officials last cycle, and is unfortunately not something that's included in this bill package, but I hope that is what we do moving forward. All right, up next, some late news out of the House last night. So the Senate adjourned yesterday afternoon, but the House had a pretty late evening, and the Michigan House overwhelmingly approved a $65 billion state spending plan with the release of billions of federal COVID-19 relief aid for K-12 schools, including a K-12 budget. And there is now an agreement between the Republican-led House and the governor. But I do want to note that this negotiation on this budget did not include the Senate Republicans. So we'll see, what happens as the budget bill moves back to our Senate chamber. Notably, I really want to point this out because I know many of our constituents have had an interest and concern in the way that we fund our schools. We hosted a town hall last term to discuss the School Finance Research Collaborative and the Michigan State University study that pointed out the funding flaws in our state system, and that Michigan has the lowest increase in education funding of any state in the country. We've dropped to the bottom, and that's a huge concern. So one of the things that the budget bill that passed the House does is, for the first time in 27 years, eliminates the funding gap between school districts. So ensures that every single pupil, regardless of where you live in the state of Michigan, receives the same per pupil funding. So that's $8,700 in base per student state aid, which doesn't include at least $1,093 more dollars in per pupil funding from a rescue package that was signed into law by President Biden in March. The state grant would rise by $589 by 7% in the vast majority of traditional districts, and including charter schools as well. So this is all schools throughout the state, and districts who are already at the higher end of the per pupil allotment would receive an additional $171, which is a 2% increase. But across the board, I think that is a huge win for those who have been advocating for school finance reform for quite some time, is that regardless of where you live, every student in the state of Michigan in the proposed budget that was put forward by the House will receive the same per pupil allotment. My office, we just spoke with Oakland County Schools this morning, who indicated that they are in strong support of what passed the House last night and are encouraging a concurrence vote when the bill comes back to the Senate. So the Senate is scheduled to meet again on June 30th. So we will be back in session next Wednesday. And my hope is that this bill can move forward as is, but we will keep everybody posted. And remaining budget negotiations will be ongoing throughout the summer. But the hope is to get the school aid budget passed as soon as possible to hit the July 1st deadline that would allow schools to set their budgets for the remaining of the year. Other news, the House also passed a $10 million relief fund for in-home healthcare providers and rehabilitation centers who are facing steep rate cuts due to the no-fault reform bill and new fee schedule reimbursement rates, which are set to go into effect in just a few days here in July. We have seen a truly heroic effort by victims of catastrophic accidents and their families who have been coming to Lansing every single day for the past few weeks to really just put this need directly in the faces of some of my colleagues. When we voted on the no-fault reform bill in 2019, I serve on the Insurance and Banking Committee in the Senate, and we heard from insurance company after insurance company after insurance company, but we never heard from any families, anybody who has been impacted by a catastrophic accident. And to me, that's devastating. And the willingness and the need to show up and tell people to their faces, if you guys do not fix this, we will lose care. We will lose support. There will be family members who will need to quit their jobs to care for loved ones, and people may get sick and may die if this isn't treated. So, I'm encouraged that there was some movement in the House. I don't know, in my mind, that this is the best solution. Rather than eliminating what the bill is being interpreted as now, which is that the no-fault reform is retroactive and includes all people who have previously been catastrophically injured. That is not how the bill was originally intended, and I think that needs to be fixed. And also, we need to take a hard look at fixing the fee schedule because there are just many in-home healthcare providers who deserve to be paid much more. Your job is to directly care for somebody's life and well-being, and we are paying people who do this work minimum wage for a stressful and very highly skilled, on both an emotional skill front and a technical skill front job. So we'll keep everybody posted. I think this is a step forward in that there is clearly an interest in fixing this and not leaving people out to dry. But I hope that there is much more to fix what we know will be the long-term impacts of the no-fault reform bill that passed in 2019. And hope that we just reconsider how we treat in-home healthcare providers and people whose job is to care for other people in our state. All right, the last thing I want to provide an update on before we get into good news is a bill that we have received over the course of the past couple of years, over 1,000 emails, phone calls about, and it is the CRNA bill. So certified nurse anesthetists. There was a bill, House Bill 4359, that passed the Michigan Senate that would codify their scope of practice so that they have more independence in their ability to practice their work. Right now, there is a requirement that CRNAs be observed or overseen by a physician or a medical doctor effectively at all times. And the version that passed the bill changed pretty substantially from what was in the House. So the requirement now is that CRNAs must meet the following requirements to practice anesthesia care without supervision: have a minimum of 3 years or more of experience practicing in the specialty field of nurse anesthetist, along with a minimum of 4,000 hours practicing in a healthcare facility, or hold a doctor or nurse anesthesia practice degree or doctor of nursing practice degree. Or be collaboratively practicing in a patient-centered care team, which must include a licensed physician that is immediately available in person or through telemedicine to address any urgent or emergency clinical concerns. The Michigan Medical Society, which represents the doctors, was initially opposed to this legislation in the House. Due to the changes that were made in the Senate, they neutral. And when I considered this bill, so a little bit of talking through the process, this is an issue that has been worked on for 10 years of nurse anesthetists looking to codify their scope of practice in order to practice more independently. And, in our district, we have the benefit of no shortage of nurses, doctors, specialists, anesthetists, anesthesiologists. We have the benefit of density and expertise here, both within our hospital networks and in private clinics. But that's not the case in more rural areas of the state where access to care is a significant challenge. So when this bill came before us, as you can imagine, there has been a fierce fight between kind of the two sides of the bill, the CRNAs and the doctors and anesthesiologists, over kind of who is allowed to practice and what that scope of practice is. And I spent a significant amount of time, as did my chief of staff, talking with people on all sides of the issue. We spoke with multiple resident doctors who are constituents. We spoke with many nurses and really tried to understand the impact, and considering that every decision I make not only impacts our district, but the entire state. So knowing that we have density and the benefit of no shortage of qualified individuals who work in medicine in our district, but knowing that my vote would impact rural areas as well. And is it my place to say that CRNAs cannot practice somewhere where it may be needed to ensure that every resident of the state of Michigan has access to affordable quality care? Also understanding that within our hospital systems, the hospital systems are overseen by physician-run boards who determine internal policies and patient quality of care. So how this is interpreted for the hospitals is largely up to those boards, and they may keep those supervision requirements intact for CRNAs. But there are also a number of other states who already allow CRNAs to practice with similar independent ability and limited oversight, as well as our military. The U.S. military allows a similar scope of practice. So when I pressed for opponents of the bill and their organizations to provide me with data that would show a significant negative impact to patient outcomes in areas where CRNAs did have this independent scope of practice, every organization told me that there is no data to support that. There was a lot of hypotheticals of things that could go wrong. But I think we've seen that in the states where this is already done, it can be done and it can be done safely. So that is how I got to a yes vote in supporting this bill. And this bill passed pretty overwhelmingly in a bipartisan basis in the Senate, and now moves back to the House, where if it gets concurrence, it will move to the governor's desk for a signature or a veto. So we've gotten a ton of outreach on this bill from both sides. As you can imagine, we represent a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, a lot of patients. My number one employer is Beaumont in our district. So I want to thank everybody who engaged on it, but wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of talk you through the process. And I am keenly aware that every time I take a vote, there are some of our constituents who are going to be on board with how I voted and some who aren't. And my process is to take in as much information as possible, spend time talking to my colleagues who have been around longer than I have, especially on a bill like this that has made its way through in many iterations for an entire decade, and to take all of that information and make the best decision possible. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us, or we can chat about it further if you have any comments. But with that, we will jump into good news. So we've got some images to share as well with this. All right. I want to start with acknowledging that last Friday was the day that we observed as a country federally recognizing Juneteenth as a national holiday for the first time in America's history. Juneteenth actually took place on Saturday. We observed it on Friday, and it's a very momentous occasion. I know that this should not be something that we look at and say, checked it off, we're done. We don't have to work on systemic racism or issues of equality any further. But my hope is that by recognizing this holiday and celebrating as a country the day that slaves in Texas learned that they were emancipated 2 years after President Lincoln signed the freeing of slaves, that is a moment of celebration. So in our office, I challenged everybody on our team to find a way to observe the first federally recognized Juneteenth in American history, and want to talk about a few of the things that our team did and encourage you to find your own way to observe and to continue to observe. So one of our staffers donated to the Martha P. Johnson Institute, which does incredible work in the community. I attended Royal Oak's first Juneteenth celebration before the rain showed up, and it was really exciting to see that take place in our community. Another member of our staff watched educational documentaries, 2 of which are on Hulu. One is Juneteenth, a celebration of overcoming, and another is Juneteenth, Together We Triumph. So these are available if you are on Hulu to watch. Another member of our team attended a Juneteenth event at West Bloomfield Middle School. And a few of us have started reading Caste, which is, challenging our understanding of, an unwritten caste system in our country. And I think it is these challenging conversations that we need to have. We have to understand our history to be able to move forward and to always be better. One of the things that I have always loved about our founding documents is that it says very specifically that we strive towards a more perfect union, which acknowledges that we are not perfect. We were not made perfect, but we are always striving towards that perfection. We can always improve. We can always get better. And that is the challenge that our founding fathers laid out for us and that we should continue. All right. Jumping into our next bit of good news, a group of young Girl Scouts in Royal Oak on Wednesday unveiled a community food pantry cabinet that they built to help people in need. So you may have seen the free little libraries all around town and throughout all of our communities. This Girl Scout troop wanted to take a similar idea and create a food pantry for anybody to walk by who needs it. Mayor Mike Fournier stopped by to see the pantry as it was unveiled and speak with the Girl Scout troop. There are 26 girls ages 5 to 9 in the troop, which has 8 adult leaders. All but one of the girls attends Oakland Elementary School, east of Campbell and south of Lincoln. The pantry is about a foot deep and roughly 30 by 30, and it was created from 2 donated kitchen cabinets. So awesome work by these girls to take initiative and help their community. And I just love seeing innovative ideas like this come together. We've got an exciting event coming up that we want to talk about. The Greater Rochester area is hosting its first ever Pride event. And Rochester High School Junior has stepped up 4 members of the LGBTQ community in her community, despite not being one of them. So this is a great example of somebody recognizing that friends and neighbors and community members deserve the same rights and recognition that we all share, who stepped up to make this event possible. Rahi Shah, 17, organized this 2-hour-long event on June 27th in Rochester. Attendees will meet at Municipal Park at 1 p.m. prior to marching to downtown. She's a lifelong resident of Rochester and organized this event with classmates, which is now garnering business support as well, from Catching Fireflies, Desert Oasis, and Skians on Main. And I will be there attending along with Congresswoman Slotkin and many others. So excited to be joining this event, especially when it's organized by young people in our community. So there's a theme that you can sense in the good news this week of young people stepping up to do amazing things for those who have less and those who may be vulnerable in their community. Finally, we want to recognize Royal Oak was named the #1 place to live in Michigan this past week in a study done by the Center Square in partnership with 24/7 Wall Street, found Royal Oak to be the best place to live in Michigan. How they determined this, we created a weighted index of 25 different measures in 4 main categories, including the economy, affordability, quality of life, and community, using data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the FBI, and other sources to identify the best city to live in each state across the country. They considered all boroughs, census-designated places, cities, towns, and villages with at least 8,000 residents. And they noted that Royal Oak is a small city that has its own downtown with shopping, bars, restaurants, and entertainment. Royal Oak also has a farmer's market that is available every Saturday in a venue that doubles as an antique market and hosts weddings, food trucks, corporate events, annual festivals, and performances. So congratulations to my home city, the city of Royal Oak. And we know that there's so many more exciting things happening in our community, and it's only going to get better from here. So with that, that is the end of our pre-planned program, and I am going to bring the one and only Liz to join us, our Director of Constituent Services, to facilitate Q&A. So Liz, how's it going? Is it raining in Lansing?
It's pouring. It's been raining for a hot minute, and I think it's going to be raining for the next few days. So I guess, let the trees grow,
Yeah, well, anybody who's been thinking you need to water your lawn, you probably don't have to now. So it's very well. What do we got this week?
Okay, well, this is exciting because we have our Submit Your Questions forum that we sent out on our e-news and and linked in our Facebook. So we actually have a question this week from that form, and I'll leave that in the comments for people to leave questions, throughout the week, and we can get to them on Fridays. But Ron asked from our forum, thoughts on what Michigan should do to prepare for the coming growth of electric vehicles?
Ron, such a great question, and we could go on about this for hours, but I'm going to keep it pretty brief. So this is an issue that I have taken up as one of my signature legislative priorities since taking office in 2019, and it's a really exciting time in this space. We know that the auto industry is Michigan's signature industry. It's our #1 industry, but for us to continue to hold on and expand our dominance in this area, we really need to be pivoting to EVs and autonomous vehicles. And we are seeing other states like California invest very heavily here, but also other countries like China who are investing very, very heavily in EV development and deployment. So, Michigan needs to step up and lead here. I am proud to serve on the state's Council of Future Mobility and Electrification. There are 4 legislators that were appointed by the governor to serve on this council, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, 1 from each chamber. And we include members of industry as well. And I think that's where a lot of the really, really good conversations are happening. So we're talking about everything from EV adoption to making sure the grid can support oncoming electric vehicles. EGLE, the Department of Energy, Great Lakes and Environment, also serves on the council. So we're talking about the intersection of industry and environmental issues, as we've seen, grid issues throughout the country, thinking about Texas, that has seen, rolling blackouts as we've seen this. We want to avoid that. So we want to make sure we're expanding our grid resiliency to support oncoming electric vehicles. So much, much more in this space. But I am really proud to serve at the center of these conversations. And we have been working on a bill package through this council that we will hope to introduce in the fall. And we'll keep everybody posted there. But stay tuned, and you can look up more information. We'll drop a link for that council so that you can learn more about it as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have one more question right now. So maybe there's time for people to bring in some more questions. But Lisa on Facebook asked, is there any update about vaccine passports similar to legislation that has passed in other states?
Yeah, so there is not any plan at this moment to introduce from a state level the idea of vaccine passports. Now, I want to be very clear that private businesses have the ability to require certain things. I know that airlines are concerned about, especially in a very small area with limited air circulation, about the potential spread for COVID-19. We've seen cruise lines grappling with this and require vaccinations to board for cruises. So no, Lisa, from the state level, there's no plan for that right now. We have seen our cases and hospitalizations drop significantly, which is a great sign. So we continue to encourage people to get vaccinated. If you have not gotten vaccinated already, I had done a video with the Oakland County Health Department a few months ago because I was a very new mom and breastfeeding. And I know that there have been a lot of questions and concerns from pregnant women or breastfeeding mothers that we wanted to help encourage people to move forward with that. So no, the answer is that there isn't anything from the state level, but as everybody's getting back out into the world, I would say check in with whatever business or organization you're attending and see what their guidelines are.
Okay, that's all the questions I see right now. I know last week my computer didn't load quick enough, so I didn't see some of them, but that's all the questions I see right now.
All right, cool. Well, with that, we will let everybody go. I hope you have a good Friday. I hope you queue up those Hulu documentaries that we posted about Juneteenth, because it's a great rainy day to watch or read a book or just hang out with family and friends. So I hope everybody stays safe. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.